Hello, Irish fans, and welcome to another edition of Dome and Domer, the oldest Notre Dame football podcast on the planet. As we head into A&M game Saturday night, big time, 105,000 is what they're expecting, even though it's 103. It's going to be hot. I know, Coffee, you were saying it's supposed to rain. I thought I saw the weather report saying it's going to be hot and muggy, but they didn't expect rain.
I don't think
So
it's going to be
maybe,
as hot as it. I don't think it's going to be as hot as it could be. I think it's.
no, no,
I
it's
think
not. It's going to
they were
be
expecting like upper 90s. I think it's going to be more like mid
No, it's going to
80s
be
ish.
80. It might
Or
even finish end of the game around 79, but they said it'll feel like 90 because of the
usually
humidity.
does
But
that.
anyways,
Everything's bigger in Texas, even the temperature.
yeah, a big, huge game. Ed, I'm going to start with you. I mean, it is Freeman's third year. This is a big moment just to see how far has he transgressed in the last, 2 years, going from being on the road at Ohio State, having 10 guys on the field at the end of the game, or actually that was at home. I take that back. It's a little bit worse than being on the road. But in any event, where are we in this era of Freeman? Do you think that they're going to show up and play to another level to get us closer to that elite status? And does this define us as being in that elite status if we win this game? Or how do you see
I,
this?
yeah, I mean, I don't think it does. I mean, partly because of the opponent. I mean, Texas A&M, is not a top 5 football team, a top 10 football team, a top 15 football team. I mean, they have a new coach because they sucked. So, they've been able to recruit well and, pay a bunch of guys a lot of money, but that's about all they've been able to do in terms of on the field performance. So, I think it's a big game because it's an SEC opponent, because it's on the road in a hostile environment, and because the expectations for Notre Dame are high this year. It really is a make the playoffs or bust, type season. I think we'd all agree that that's the case. I don't think they're going to get much, um, you know, uh, leeway in terms of losing 2 games. If they lose on Saturday night, it'll be difficult to run the table. I think a 2-loss Notre Dame team is sort of really on the bubble in terms of a 12-team
Yeah, not a
playoff because
guarantee,
of
that's
this
for sure.
because of the strength of the schedule, at least on paper so far. So I think it's a very big game, and I think it's when you think about, like, the old days, and in the old days, Joe Alt and Blake Fisher wouldn't have gone anywhere, and it'd be a hell of an offensive line returning, which would have made it a super strong
Yeah.
football team. Um, but they've got to figure out a way, by hook or by crook, to win this football game. I really think that they do, because number one, they need to create some confidence going into the rest of the year for themselves, but also they need to show the country that Notre Dame can win a big football game. They've beaten Clemson at home in the last few years. They kind of won a meaningless bowl game last year. They took Ohio State to the wire, but they didn't finish the job. Does Marcus Freeman have a signature win yet? I don't think so. So, go out, figure out a way to win the game. I don't care if it's some people are saying a rock fight, 17-10. Other people are, the over under, I think, is 46.5 right now. I don't really care. Just figure out a way.
Yeah,
I don't care if
I
it's
would
two.
agree
I
that.
don't care if it's 2 defensive touchdowns and 4 Aggie turnovers. And the offense gets 112 yards total. I don't care. Just figure out a way to win the game, and then then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're right. It's going to be critical. Look, if they win this game, Notre Dame's going to be 4-0 for sure, like no doubt about it. And then they're going to head into the Louisville game. Uh, Look, Coffee, I'm kind of curious. Ed touched on it a little bit. Do you think it's a little overblown on the situation with the tackles on the offense? Is that really going to come out and play a big, huge part of this game Saturday night? Or does Denbrock kind of overcome that by orchestrating a few attack plans that might negate that a bit, and it doesn't really come into play as much?
Well, I think he's certainly capable of doing that. It's unfortunate in that I think if you look at all the matchups in this game, it's the Aggie defensive line, which is by far their strength, versus an inexperienced Notre Dame line where A&M really has a very strong advantage. Uh, and unfortunately, it's the kind of advantage that could work to Notre Dame's detriment because these kids are really going to have to play, or as you said, Denbrock's going to have to scheme it up to protect them as much as they can. Now, keep in mind these youngsters on the left side beat out guys who have been playing the last couple years, and I don't think that Marcus Freeman is in the habit of saying, well, I'm just going to play this guy just to play him. I mean, you really know that these guys outperformed their teammates in practice over the last X number of weeks. Now, does that mean they're up to the challenge of what A&M is going to throw at them? I certainly hope so. But I really kind of wish that the schedule was set up like it is next season, where A&M is going to be like the third game or something like that. I mean, I wish if we could have flipped Northern and A&M on the schedule, I'd be much, much happier. But as Ed said, the key in this game is just find a way to win. If it's ugly, doesn't matter. We need the victory. Then
Yeah,
you've got 3 games in a row against teams that, against compared to which Notre Dame is much, much more talented, should be able to iron bugs out and get people experience. And then when Louisville comes in, take things from there.
yeah. I don't know. I kind of, to a certain extent, part of me thinks that it's a good thing that we're playing them early because of Elko coming into a new program like this and, get a few more games under his belt and he might start to find the angles with this team. Whereas when the very first game you're playing, you got to kind of figure out what you have. And so part of me thinks that it may not be bad that we're getting Elko early. But I agree with you. I kind of prefer for us just being the moving parts that we got to get some game experience and then go into that kind of an environment because it is going to be a culture shock. It's pretty obvious Riley Leonard's never played in an environment like this. And so this is something he's going to see for the first time. But having said that, Ed, what do you think are going to be kind of the key moments, or not necessarily the key moments, but the key players or key things that Notre Dame's going to have to accomplish if they do pull this out? Is it just heavily slanted to the defense? Does the defense have to play airtight, or do you think it's more onus on the offense moving with some big plays that we're just going to have to make?
Yeah, I mean, when I think about kind of these hyped games in the past, oftentimes the conventional wisdom going in gets kind of flipped on its head. Like I remember going into a game, I don't know, it was a pretty big game, the first game of the season, right, where you don't know what you've got, and it was, oh, Notre Dame's defensive backfield is, it's the weakness, it's the weakness, it's the weakness, and then I think Lowood had a pick six, and they, held the other team to 112 yards passing, and so you don't. It wouldn't surprise me. I mean, it's not like we're playing Myles Garrett and J.J. Watt. I'm sure they're a good defensive line, but they're not. There's like you said. I mean, I feel pretty good about the fact that Anthony Knapp and Emil Wagner and Pendleton. I mean, I'm sure, because of this, it was ones on ones for training camp, right? So they were going against Botello, they were going against Burnham, they were going against R.J. Oben, they were going against Mills and Cross, and so it's a pretty good laboratory to see what they've got when it's also a strength of our team that they're competing against in practice every day, right? So yeah, I think that it would not surprise me if Notre Dame's wide receivers, which I think are vastly improved in terms of a unit, much deeper. I think they've got, I would not be surprised if they make some plays that are the difference in the game because nobody's talking about them. It wouldn't surprise me if, conversely, Benjamin Morrison or Christian Gray, get burned, right? And something that we don't expect on our end, happens where, we give up a big play. A&M has a pretty good quarterback, and you can't sort of play perfectly, even if you're Benjamin Morrison or even if you're Xavier Watts. Maybe they'll make a mistake. So I think there'll be some things, some curveballs that sort of the sort of on the paper analysis sort of is going to sort of miss just because football's a crazy game and you never really know what you've got until the season starts. And but I just think the wild card is Riley Leonard. I mean, he's like I said the last time we did this, he could either end up being a poor man's Josh Allen and be somebody that's kind of becomes a Notre Dame folk hero, take us to the playoffs, win a couple games. He seems to have that swagger. He makes plays with his legs, or he could go down in a heap, in the middle of the second quarter. We don't even see him again until week 7. Like he's
And
a little.
Knock on wood. It's just, don't say that
that
out
is
loud.
that's a serious. No, I think you're right though, Ed. That is a totally that could easily happen, and that would be consistent with what's happened up to this point. So I would be in agreement with you there. Kobe, I've heard a little. I don't know how much you've been paying attention, but I've heard a little scuttlebutt that there's a couple guys that are banged up pretty bad. Nothing that's being reported as injuries, but Mitchell Evans has been, kind of sore and, sat on the sidelines a few times. Howard Cross. I mean, there's guys that are banged up that you just don't know. It's not something you're going to let the cat out of the bag, but is that anything that you think that's got any weight to
Well,
it, or is that just all?
I haven't necessarily heard about anything. I mean, I think at this point, when you're going through training camp and you're playing those one-on-ones and you're it's high speed, it's a lot of hits. I think it's natural for some players to get like a ding here and there, and I don't think it necessarily is like the end of the world. The beauty of Notre Dame's defense is the depth all around is just absolutely phenomenal. I think Notre Dame has a legitimate player at both positions in a lot of the defensive 11. I mean, Howard Cross might be dinged up a little bit, but hey, if it's next man in, I'm not really all that worried about it. And even some of the young guys like KVA and all that are just playing very, very well. So I think it helps that these guys are in the third year of Golden System. The older guys really know how to work it, and they can help the younger guys because they've already been schooled in the system what Golden likes to do. So there isn't so much teaching with them. Whereas if Golden is teaching the younger guys, now the older guys can help teach them also. It's not like Golden has to show everybody what he's doing. He's got a vast majority of players know his system, are ready to go after it. And I think that's going to help move the young guys along. So if there are guys who are dinged up a little bit, I think we've got the depth to overcome it.
Yeah, I would agree with you there. It's going to be interesting to see the mentality show through with the culture that Freeman's built here. Next man in is one of it, but I think the thing that I kind of pay a lot of attention to that has me excited about the way he's gone about this is the whole mentality of trying to create the best version of you that you can. So every single human being on the planet for that matter has talents that have been given to them. And in order to be the best version of yourself, you have to accentuate those talents and build on them. I think what Freeman's doing is he's approaching the players and saying, "Hey, I want to make you the very best football player that you could be, and you're constrained by the talents that you have, but it's my job to get you to that point where you're performing at a peak level based on what you've been given." And I think that's an exciting approach. I like that. It's tough to translate. That's not easier said than done. But I do think that is, something that's going to play through here. I'm kind of curious, Ed, because there's a few, every time you play a big game like this, there's certain key statistics that you kind of look at that you just say, man, if we can just do this, then we're going to be fine. One of those key things that I think jumps out at you is Riley Leonard and what is his rushing yards at the end of the night. Because I think if that rushing yards isn't higher than 50, we're going to be in deep trouble. I think if you get him running the football, maybe 75 yards, man, that puts a lot of pressure on the defense. And it's just one of those game changers when you got a dual threat like him that can just really make big changes and momentum changes in the game when it's 3rd and 8, nobody's open, everybody's covered, but yet he sneaks through, gets a first down. I mean, those are big moments.
Yeah,
I
no,
mean,
I agree. Although I kind of disagree with your premise because I think that if Notre Dame can move the ball effectively without him having to make plays with his legs, In other words, if they could,
Well, that's going to be a great night if that's the case.
well, yeah, but I mean, you're right in the sense that they will need him to extend a play here or there, or to save their ass, a couple times.
Yeah.
But if you can use his designed runs for him fairly selectively, in other words, not sort of put him in harm's way unnecessarily, where you sort of have a little bit of the element of surprise because you've been fairly effective running the ball conventionally and throwing the ball conventionally. That's when I think, like you said, you've really got some. That's when Denbrock can really sort of demonstrate his value and make life very, very difficult for a defense. I think an interesting stat is that A&M's record away from Kyle Field has been better in SEC games than it
That
has
is
been
it.
at
Yeah,
home.
I saw
There's
that.
a lot of hype
That
about
is interesting.
what a tough place it is to play. Um, and I'm sure it is, and I'm sure it'll be loud. Um, but I think I think it's going to be very, very interesting what kind of a start the offensive line gets off to um, with the noise. In other words, like we've seen Notre Dame offenses come out and look, it basically takes them a quarter and a half before they get the snap count right. Everybody's on the same page. There's a couple of motion. We've seen that, right? But we've also seen situations where they neutralize the crowd effectively by basically having their process and their system down pat in terms of how they're going to run the offense. By basically when nobody can hear anybody, they can't hear themselves think, and put an initial drive together. Get 3 points, something, move the ball, or maybe even just move the ball between the 20s or 30s, miss a field goal or whatever. But establish a little bit of confidence for themselves in this line that everybody's going to be staring at and assuming that they're going to be, struggling and on their back foot, all night. So, yeah, I think the first quarter, this is a game where the first quarter will have an outsized importance for both teams. And, I like the fact that, I like Mike Coffey said, I like I like our weapons. I like the options that Denbrock has to play with. I hope Mitchell Evans is healthy because I think he's a
Well, I do.
terrific
I think that
piece of the
that's
puzzle.
he's a huge piece. If he's playing healthy, he's just a guy that gets separation. I think Faison is also still underrated, even though he had a good year last year. He's a guy that does get separation. I read an interesting article about him just in terms of what an advantage it is for him to play lacrosse because lacrosse is all about separation. I mean, that's what those guys do the whole game. It's
Right.
all about separation. So those little angles that you take in lacrosse is effectively translated on the football field when you're getting away from a DB, and those little arm angles that you take and the little bit of a push off. I think it's a big reason why he's so successful in separating himself. And it wouldn't surprise me at all if he ends up with 5, 6 catches Saturday night because I think he's that good of a receiver to get open. But Coffee, let me ask you: do you think there's a particular ebb and flow, or what you would like to see that's going to be a key to Notre Dame winning? Do they have to be up after the first quarter, or is there anything like that you think is going to be, or is this just going to be all the way down to the very end, and it's going to be separated by a couple plays?
I think it is going to be the latter. I think the key thing, I mean, even beyond dealing with the noise and establishing the offense, is just not letting themselves get rattled. I think if something goes wrong early, just have a very short memory about it. And yeah, we may have to depend on the defense to pull us out of this one. But you know what? Later in the season, the offense may have to pull out one for the defense. I mean, it's a team game. I think I don't want to come out of this with any like overanalyzing or anything like that. I think right now I want to see a win. And as we said earlier, if it's ugly, it's ugly. If it's not, it's not. But the key thing is if they can take the crowd out of it, so much the better. But they can't let the crowd dictate how they're playing. They have to maintain confidence at all levels of the offense, at all levels of the defense to say, okay, yeah, if there's a mistake, we're down 10-0 or something, and then like late in the first quarter, you can't let that tell the story of the game. You got to keep your head on straight and just stay focused and play well. And I think that the culture that Marcus Freeman has built will lend itself to that, because it, from things that I've read and heard, there's Riley Leonard's leadership is off the charts, man. I'm not saying Sam Hartman was a bad leader. He wasn't at all. But Leonard's leadership on the offense is even better than Hartman's was. I mean, he's got the guys believing in him. He's got the guys focused on him. And if he can help them keep their heads together, I think we'll be in good shape.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I'm hearing the same stuff too. So hopefully that shows itself Saturday night.
I just like the fact that he's a big dude. You know,
He
we
is.
haven't had a big dude
Yeah.
quarterback for a while. I mean,
Yeah,
Jack Cohn
we've
was-
had tiny dudes, and
Yeah, I mean,
we
you know,
need big
Ian
dudes.
Book, you know, Brandon Wimbush.
Who, by the way, Ian Book looked really good. I don't know if you guys saw that game. Man, he looked good.
He's
I
with the
give him a
Chiefs
lot.
now, right?
Yeah, I thought he really looked good. I was
saw
kind of
that
shocked.
touchdown pass. Yeah.
Yeah, he looked good.
I mean, the last big dude Notre Dame had was really Kaiser. You know, he was a big guy, and he was also a guy that would stick his nose in there and get you 3 or 4 yards, except when it really mattered against Clemson. But anyways, but I think when you've got a quarterback who can, you know, knock some people over, that is, like you said, that's not just sort of like, you know, leadership in the huddle. That's sort of leadership on the field. And I think guys really like to play with a quarterback like that, who's got a little bit of football player in him, not just quarterback. But yeah, but I, you know, that's where the focus will be. But I think what the point that you guys made earlier, I mean, you can't put a value on a guy like Kaiser, you know, being in the system, kind of being a really bright guy to begin with, and being a playmaker. You know, like, you know, let's not forget. I mean, you know, as a high school athlete, I mean, he was sort of, you know, on the football field, he was offense, defense, special teams, you know, kicking. I mean, he just knows the game, and he knows how to make plays. He's been doing it for his whole life. So, and you've also got him, you know, making the calls. And I'm sure that he's as mind melded with Al Golden as anybody on that roster. And he's right in the middle of the defense where you want the mind melded guy to play. So, I think that's, you know, I don't know if Elko's got a guy like that yet. It wouldn't surprise me if he doesn't.
Yeah, I would agree with you. I think it's going to be a real key to the game is how well Kaiser not only plays well himself, but as you said, kind of directs things, because he is a guy like that's dialed in without Golden. He's in his 6th year. I mean, this guy been around the program, been there, done that. Quality leadership kid, no doubt about it. And that's going to bring a lot of calm to that defense.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but doesn't this year both Golden and Denbrock have a headset set up with Leonard and Kaiser respectively?
Until the 15-second minute mark, or 15-second mark, which I think that is fascinating in and of itself, is how well are they prepared for that? Because at 15 seconds, that cuts off. And you better have gotten your talking points in.
I'm sure they've been practicing with it.
I would think so, but even still, I mean, that'll be interesting to see how that plays out, because that's a big change. I've seen it already in college football games. You know, the quarterbacks are going like that because they're just trying to listen in on.
Right.
And that's a huge, man, I tell you, that's a big game change. I agree with you. That's going to be fascinating.
Who's monitoring that? Like, are these games like, I mean, you know, it just seems like it's rife for, I mean, you know, if Connor Stallions is, you know, on the sidelines, who knows what time it's getting cut off? Maybe it's getting cut off at, you know, 2 seconds, or the other team's getting cut off at 21 seconds. I mean, who the hell knows?
I'll tell you what, I'll never admit this outside of this podcast, but when I was a senior at Marion, the coach, the offensive coordinator, came down to tell me that we were receiving we could hear the other coach's headset the whole game.
Whoops.
I think the right thing to have done would have been to call a timeout, tell the ref, hey, come on over. Hey, we're actually hearing the coaches. But no, he didn't do that.
You mean it was like not like from the booth over in the press box, but you mean like transmitting, like the frequencies were like.
Yeah, so we could actually hear the other coaches telling each other which play to call.
Whoops.
So let's hope that something like that happens in our favor Saturday night. That would be a nice one.
And you still threw 3 picks, didn't you, Mike?
What's that?
And you still threw 3 picks that night.
Exactly. Yeah. That's right. I'm coming off the sidelines yelling, "Well, we even know what the play is. How did that happen?" All right, Coffee. Let's hear your prediction.
I'm still keeping it the same as before. I was Irish 27-14, but it's due to a defensive score by Notre Dame in the last like 3 minutes.
Okay.
So it'll be close up until then.
Ed, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I really like the fact that everybody from, the odds makers to Bruce Feldman to, everybody's picking A&M. I mean,
Yeah.
some of them don't even have Notre Dame scoring in double digits in this game. So, I'm going to say that, it's going to go over, which is going to surprise people, and
That is
Notre Dame's going to
surprising.
win 31-20.
Oh man,
Wow.
that's a big
Okay.
spread.
Release the God's ears.
I'm gonna give a shout out to my brother. He's got a group of guys that since 2015 have been getting together, predicting Notre Dame scores. They call it "Guess Like a Champion." So all of these guys, they're former Dillon guys in the early 70s. That not all of them, but most of the group is that.
And they can do math.
They all
and
get
everything?
together. Yeah, and they do
That's impressive.
predictions. One of the guys, Paul Michaels, unfortunately has got some health issues going through. So they reached out to me and said, "Hey, would you be willing to give a prediction and we'll pass it up as Dome and Domer?" So there's a lot of pressure on this pick that I'm about to give.
Okay.
But definitely keep Paul in your prayers if you can. He's going through some health issues, but it sounds like he's getting a little bit better, which is good news. But in light of that, I'm going to give my best prediction for this, and I'm going to say 23-20. And I even think might be a late score by Riley Leonard orchestrated in the fourth quarter, whether he puts us in field goal range or what. But I kind of do think it's going to be a little bit of a defensive slugfest just early in the year, and these two teams kind of going back and forth. So we'll see. But I'm going to say 23-20.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Okay.
Well, hey, it's going to be a lot of fun. That's for sure. I didn't get a chance to check the score, but North Dakota State was up on Deion Sanders, I think 10-7. I mean, it's early, but hey, that's a heck of a football program. That's right where our office is. By
Actually,
the way,
at the moment, Colorado's up 24-20.
All right, there you go. Well, hey, I tell you, North Dakota State's put out some pretty decent football players. I think Carson Wentz was from there, was a quarterback there at one point. But it's a doggone good football program. They got a great atmosphere up there. About 100,000 people tailgate before their games in the Fargo Dome. So it's even though they're FBS, right? I think this lower division, but they've got some serious talent there. So in any event.
Well, I just saw a little bit of the game before we started recording this, and I was very impressed in a small sample size with Shedeur Sanders. I mean,
he's the real deal. Yeah, he is.
He isn't just he has something that all the great ones have, which he feels pressure really well. Like he steps up, he swivels to the side. He's really, really good at that. I mean, there's a lot of guys who can throw the ball, but I mean, he has that instinct, and he was like, I don't know, 8 for 9 for 200 yards and 2 touchdowns in the first half. So I don't think Coach Prime has that great a team, but he's got a really good quarterback.
Yeah, he does.
And that's probably why they'll win tonight.
Yeah, I think he's going to be a first round pick. I really do. I think he's the real deal. He leads his receivers really well.
Yeah.
I mean, he throws right to the spot. He does not just wing it, and receivers got to make a great catch. He's the kind of guy that sees the field, and man, he can really put it on a dime. I think he's the real deal. It's too bad that he's not playing for a big time program, because I think he could take a team a long, long way. He's that good. But it'll be interesting. It's going to be a great year this year.
The only thing standing between him and an incredible career is his dad.
Well, we'll see. I mean, he got him this far. Nice. So yeah, that's going to be interesting. We're gonna see about that. Great. We're going to leave it there. You've been listening to Dome and Domer, an online conversation about Notre Dame sports from a fan's perspective. For Ed Jordanek, Mike Coffey, I'm Mike Brammer. Thanks for listening.